Hello, welcome to one more episode of Quantum Tutorials. In this episode, we are going to cover about how to package a jQuery plugin into Visualizer project. We are going to learn about developing a Visualizer app to use jQuery signature capture plugin. We want to create this as a playlist where we learn about how to extend the functionality of an app developed using Visualizer by using external libraries like jQuery signature capture plugin or some external library developed using Cordova, etc. So as part of this playlist, this is the first video in which we are going to talk about how to include a jQuery signature capture plugin into a Visualizer project and use that as part of the forms and code that we write as part of the Visualizer project. So without further ado, let's look at how we can do that using Visualizer. As a first step, let us download the jQuery signature capture plugin from the internet. I'm just searching for the jQuery signature capture plugin. So here I'm able to find jQuery signature capture plugins on Make It Web, one of the websites that we got from the Google search. Let's see if we can download this and try to use it as part of our Visualizer application. Now that we have downloaded the plugin, this is the zip file that got downloaded. Let us extract this and look at the contents that are present as part of this zip file. Here is the extracted version of the zip file. It looks like there are three signature capture plugins that are part of this zip file, and there are various examples HTML files in which they are using this jQuery signature capture plugins. As a next step, let us create a Visualizer project and then include the downloaded jQuery plugins into the local web assets as part of that project. Let's start creating the Visualizer project. You can select either web or native. I'm doing the native app. So I'm giving the project name as use jQuery, meaning in this example we are going to look at how to use a jQuery plugin inside a Visualizer project, and we are creating this project. Once the project is created, we can see a folder called web inside the project. So inside this web folder of the project, we can include any of the web assets like HTML files, JS, JavaScript files, or CSS files that we want to have as part of our Visualizer project. So inside this web, I'm going to import or include the jQuery plugins of the signature capture widget that we have downloaded. On the local files, I'm going to the resource location. And from the downloads where we have extracted the zip file that we have downloaded, I'm copying the contents of this zip file and I am putting them inside the local files folder under the web folder of our project. Let's go back to the visualizer and I refresh the project inside visualizer to be able to see the new files that we have added under the web local files structure. Here is the jQuery plugins that we have included as part of the visualizer project. As a next step, after including the jQuery plugins as part of the visualizer project, let's see how we can use this jQuery plugin inside the forms and the code that we write as part of this project. I'm creating a new form. FRM capture signature, and inside this form I want to use the jQuery plugin that we have included as part of this project. So we'll have to use a browser widget into which we can include this jQuery plugin. So from the default libraries, I am selecting the browser widget to be part of my form. I'm just adjusting the height and width of the browser widget. So I have the width of the browser widget to occupy the entire form width and the height to be 50% of the form. Now inside this browser widget, I want to use the jQuery plugin. So I will be using one of these example HTML files that are part of this jQuery plugin that we have downloaded inside this browser widget. Double click on the browser widget and inside the type property of the browser widget, select the local file and you will be able to browse through the HTML files that you have included under the web folder of your project. So I am selecting example3.html. So this is how the jQuery plugin would render as part of our form. Using that example3.html, I am able to show that HTML file inside the browser widget that we have on the form. Let us build this application and verify how this shows up at the runtime. I am performing a live preview build and let's build for adaptive web. So this is how inside the browser widget that we have on our form, we are able to render the HTML that we have included as part of our web folder inside the visualizer, and this HTML file is using the jQuery plugins that we have included as part of the visualizer project. Let us inspect this HTML file and look at how it is using the jQuery plugins. Just click on the example3.html that we are using inside the browser widget on our form, and you will be able to see the code related to that example3.html. Here they are using this jQuery signature plugin. So under the folder jQuery.signature, the code for this jQuery signature plugin is present. So the jQuery.signature.js file is the JS file that is included as part of that jQuery signature plugin, which is being used as part of this HTML file. And this HTML file is what we are rendering as part of the browser widget that we have on our form. Let's open the adaptive web build that we have generated from a Chrome browser by changing the user agent of the Chrome browser to be either Android phone's user agent or iPhone's user agent. And let's see how this application behaves inside the Chrome browser. I'm copying the URL. Inside the Chrome browser, I'm changing the user agent by going to the developer tools, and here I'm selecting Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus as the user agent of my Chrome browser, and I'm rendering this Android adaptive web live preview build that we have generated for our project. As you can see here, so we have given 50% height for our browser widget on the form, and inside the browser widget we are opening the example3.html, and this example3.html is using the jQuery signature plugin inside it. As you can see, we are able to put our signature here, and when we click on preview, it's able to show the preview. All this is part of the jQuery plugin, and inside the example3 HTML file that we are showing as part of the browser widget. So now that we are able to include a jQuery plugin as part of a form inside the visualizer application, and we are able to use it. As a next step, let us see how we can read the data from this jQuery plugin into the code of the visualizer project, into the modules that we write as part of the visualizer project. So we can use this captured signature either to send it to a service call or to display it on a different part of the same form in any other way. So in the next step, we are going to look at how to read the data from the browser context from this jQuery plugin into the native context of the visualizer project. As a next step, we want to read the data from the jQuery plugin that we have included on our form into the modules or the JavaScript code that we write as part of the visualizer project. So let's define a JS module as part of our visualizer project. So I'm going under modules and I'm creating a new JS module. Inside this new JS module, I want to create a function which will be called from the jQuery plugin, and once the signature is done and when we click on submit button inside that HTML page, we will call this function that we are going to write. So from the web context, we will call this JS function that we are going to write as part of the module of our visualizer project and send the captured signature into this function. So let's define one function. So here I am defining one function. And we are defining an input parameter to this function so that the captured signature from the web context from the example3.html will be sent as part of this input parameter, and we are capturing as a global variable inside the JS function that we have written inside the module that is part of Visualizer project. So now let's see how we can call this function from the web context. So when I say web context, from the HTML file which we have included as part of the web folder inside our Visualizer project. Before that, let's save this JS module that we have created. Let's look at the preview of this example3.html file by using this open preview option. So this is how the example3.html file is showing up in the preview. So now let's add a new button just besides the preview button that we have as submit, and our intention is when the user signs and clicks on the submit button, the signature that he does inside this jQuery plugin will be captured and will be sent to this function that we have written as part of the module files inside the Visualizer project. So let's go to the example3.html and we are defining a button and to this submit button we want to define the on click functionality. So I'm just copying the on click functionality of the previous button that we have already inside this example3.html. And we are defining the on click event of submit button. I'm just changing the ID of the button, and for the on click event, what is the function that should get executed? We want to capture the signature that is made as a SVG file, whether to capture it as an SVG file or to capture it as a JSON. This is part of the signature capture jQuery plugin that we have included. So it is part of this jQuery signature.js file that we have included as part of our Visualizer project. So if we inspect a little bit of this jQuery.signature.js file, so we will be able to see that there are options to capture the signature that is drawn as a JSON or an SVG. So we want to capture it as an SVG. When the submit button is clicked, so I am passing the value as SVG, and then the captured output we want to send it back into the function that we have created as part of the module get signature from jQuery plugin. So this is the function that we want to call from the web context, that is from this HTML file that we have as part of the jQuery plugin. Let's see how to do that. So there is an API called Kony.evaluate JavaScript in native context. Using this API, we will be able to execute or invoke the function that we have written as part of the JS modules inside the Visualizer project. So let's get the function name. And to this function, we have to pass one parameter. So when the function that we have when the function that we have created as part of the JS modules is having multiple input parameters, how do we send those input parameters from this web context into the native context? When we say native context, that is nothing but the JavaScript modules that we write as part of the visualizer project. When we say the web context, it's nothing but the HTML file which is getting executed as part of the browser widget that we have on the form. So if we have multiple inputs to the function that we have inside our JS module that we are trying to evaluate from the web context, so we can create an array, and inside this array we can push the number of input parameters that we want to send to this function, and using this json.stringify we can pass the array as an input to this function that we are evaluating from the web context. So here I will be pushing the output that we have captured, which is nothing but the SVG format of the signature that is drawn inside the signature capture widget. So using this line of code, the API coney.evaluate JavaScript in native context, we can invoke the functions that we write as part of visualizer JS modules from the HTML files that we include as part of local web asserts inside the visualizer project. Let us build this project and see how this behaves. The build is generated. Let us refresh the application that we have opened inside the browser, and we can see the new submit button showing up inside the jQuery plugin, the HTML file that we are rendering as part of this browser widget on the form. And if we do a signature and then when we click on submit, we are capturing this signature as an SVG file in the SVG format, and we are sending it to the function that we have written inside the JS modules of our visualizer project. Let's put a breakpoint inside that function that we have created inside the modules of visualizer project and see how this signature is sent into that function. I am putting a breakpoint inside the on click event of the submit button in the web context, that is in the HTML file that we have included as part of this application. And I am putting a breakpoint in the function that we have written as part of our JS modules. So I kept two breakpoints in the application code now. And let's refresh the application and we do a signature, and when we click on submit, So the first breakpoint that we have put in the on click event of the submit button. So this is happening inside the HTML file that we have included as part of our visualizer project. So this got hit, and we can step over and see the SVG format of the signature that we have made on the signature capture plugin. And we are passing this to the function get signature from jQuery plugin that we have written inside the JS modules of visualizer project by using this coney.evaluate JavaScript in native context API. So if I click on resume, the second breakpoint that we have put inside this function get signature from jQuery plugin, which is part of the JS modules of the visualizer project, would get hit. So I'm clicking on resume. You can see the error here. Uncaught exception, enable native communication property for the browser widget is set to false. So which means when we are trying to use this API coney.evaluate JavaScript in native context, we have to make sure that we enable a property on the browser widget which says native communication. To be able to use the coney.evaluate JavaScript in native context from the HTML that we are rendering as part of the browser widget, we have to enable this native communication property on the browser widget. So I am switching it to on. Let us save these changes and regenerate the build. So the build is generated. Let us refresh the application that we have rendered in the browser, and let's rerun the test case. So we are doing the signature capture and clicking on submit. This would hit the on click event of the submit button in the HTML file, and we click on resume here. So it will hit the JS module and the function that we have written inside JS module of the visualizer application. So now as we can see here, the function that we have written inside the JS module of the visualizer project is getting executed. So from the web context, we landed in the native context, and if we see the signature capture, the input parameter, so we are able to see the captured signature in the SVG format is being passed as an input parameter to this function. So that's how from the native context we are able to get the signature captured from the web context from the HTML file which is running inside the browser which is using the jQuery plugin. As a next step, let us see how we can use the captured signature and show it on the browser widget, another browser widget on the form. Now, as part of this last step, let us see how we can use the signature that is captured in the SVG format from the web context into the visualizer native context and display that captured signature inside the form. So basically, we will be looking at how to use that data captured from the web context inside the native context of the form. On the form, let me put another browser widget. So the intention is we want to display the captured signature from the web context, from the jQuery plugin into the browser that we have on this form. So let us rename. Display captured signature, and let us adjust the height and width of this browser widget. I am placing it to be at 55% from the top, because our earlier browser widget is having a height of 50%. And the height of the second browser widget, I am defining it as 90% or 40%. So this is the browser widget inside which we want to display the captured signature from the jQuery plugin that we have inside the other browser widget on our form. This is just to display and show that the data captured from the jQuery widget can be used as part of the native context inside the visualizer application. In a real-time scenario, the data captured, you might want to send it to a service call for further processing and other implementations. So inside this forms controller, let us define a function and inside this function we will be displaying the captured signature on the second browser widget that we have on this form. Browser display captured signature dot HTML So the global variable into which we have captured the signature from the jQuery plugin. So we are using that global variable and we are displaying that captured SVG format of the signature in the browser widget that we have on this form. Let's preview this. Before we do the preview, we'll have to invoke this function, right? So on this form, let us have a button just building the use case. So when we click on this button, we will be displaying the captured signature widget in the second browser widget that we have on this form. On click of this button, I'll invoke the function that we have written as part of the forms controller to display the captured signature. Now let's save these changes and generate the preview build. The build is generated. Let us refresh the application in the browser and test the use case. So we are able to see the button and the new browser widget here. So we'll do the signature inside the jQuery plugin that we have as part of the first browser widget on the form. And then when I click on submit, it will pass this signature in the SVG format into the native context of the visualizer. After passing it to the native context, now on the form, when we click on this button that we have on the form, the captured data, we want to display it on the browser that we have on the form, the second browser widget. So I click on this button. So the captured signature, which is part of the global variable, is being shown in the second browser widget in the native context of the form. So from the web context, we are able to execute the jQuery plugin, capture the signature, and send it into the native context of visualizer. And when we click on this button, we are using that captured signature and showing that signature in the native context of the visualizer. So, as part of this episode, we are able to see how to include a jQuery signature capture plugin into the web content as part of visualizer's project locally and use that inside a visualizer form and capture the signature from the jQuery plugin, and the captured signature is sent into the native context of visualizer, and we are showing that captured signature on a different browser directly, which is present on the visualizer form. So in this way, we can extend the functionality that we can build as part of a visualizer project by using this web content that we can locally bundle as part of a visualizer project. In this use case, we are using a jQuery signature capture plugin. We'll look at some of the other use cases where we'll also do an example to see how to include a Cordova plugin into the visualizer project and extend the functionality that we built as part of the visualizer applications. Thank you.